One accusation Tulsi Gabbard gets a lot, that she is a Russian asset, bought and paid for by the Kremlin. Some of the meat, I guess, behind that theory comes from our man right here, John F. O'Donnell, has a harrowing tale about Tulsi Gabbard.
Damn, is he her handler? Oh.
Wild story.
Kind of. Is her 2020 campaign, yeah.
Okay, so here we go. First of all, John F. O'Donnell, very publicly bipolar, have had manic episodes. One of the symptoms of mania is spending money recklessly. So one time when I was manic, I impulsively donated $1,000 to former Hawaii Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard's presidential campaign. And this is what I say. So I basically have this 8-minute story that I do on stage as a bit. I'll do like a variation of that for you guys. So basically, I donated $1,000 to her campaign because at the time, she was the most overtly anti-regime change war candidate, and because we were supposed to be together. At least that's what I kind of thought at the time. And guess what happens if you donate $1,000 to Tulsi Gabbard's presidential campaign? You get a phone call from her mother. Carol Gabbard called me for real, Freddie.
You can ask for a hand in marriage then. Yeah, if you get the mother on the phone.
And because of the time I was such an exuberant Tulsi supporter with such a deep dive knowledge of her political history and presidential campaign, me and Carol talked on the phone for like 40 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, Carol, I can't believe the way the mainstream media is treating Tulsi. She's a veteran, for God's sakes. This is ridiculous. She went down to Syria on a fact-finding mission and saw that our government, the CIA, was arming all sorts of terrorist groups like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and al-Nusra. She then came back and introduced into Congress the Stop Arming Terrorist Act. That didn't even get out of committee. Are you kidding me? And now CNN is trying to paint her as being a Putin apologist and Assad puppet? Not cool. And then Carol was like, I know, it's crazy. Like my manic ramblings resonated with her 100%. Right around the time that I made this donation, it was right when the mainstream media, the corporate media, was making all of these unsubstantiated claims that the Russian propaganda machine was aligning itself behind Tulsi Gabbard. And maybe some of your listeners know that myself and Anders, I worked for this radical political comedy news show, Redacted Tonight, for close to 5 years, and I'm super proud of all of the work I did on that show. Also, it was predominantly funded by the Russian government. Whatever.
So we were actual Russian assets. Like
yeah.
that.
When the mainstream media was saying that the Russian propaganda machine was aligning itself behind Tulsi, I was like, wait a minute, that's bullshit. I work for the Russian propaganda machine, and that's not what's happening. I'll be goddamned if I'm gonna let this Russiagate nothing burger narrative undermine Tulsi Gabbard's presidential campaign. And what I say in the bit is like for the record, I don't believe that Redacted Tonight was part of the Russian propaganda machine. I think that the show brilliantly used the platform it was given to amplify the voices of independent journalists and frontline activists, all while really telling the truth about what's going on in a very broken, whitewashed corporate media landscape. Also, those rubles always came in on time, baby. Thank you, Big Daddy Vladdy. Thank you, Big Daddy Vladimir Putin. He's a monster. All right. He's a monster. So is the U.S. and NATO. There's a lot of neo-Nazis in the Ukraine. I don't want to talk about it. So I really thought they were going to use this red baiting of Tulsi to undermine her presidential campaign. And if you're paying attention at the time, that's actually what they did. So I came up with like a manic plan to save her. I realized that I was going to create like a Russiagate breadcrumb trail for some corporate hack journalists to scurry down the rabbit hole of. And then when they got to the bottom of it, instead of finding the Russian propaganda machine aligning itself behind Tulsi, they were going to find me and feel ridiculous about themselves. So I realized when I made the donation, you could put anything you wanted in the name section. So I put Goofy Grapes. Because as all of your viewers know and listeners know, Goofy Grapes is the alias I created 14 years ago when I needed to temporarily take over control of the internet in order to keep the neocons from erasing evidence of their war crimes from YouTube. We all know this.
Goofy Grapes.
Because otherwise they were going to assassinate me.
Sounds very Hanna-Barbera.
Yeah, it does, right? And clearly it worked because I'm still here.
Yeah.
So for name, I put Goofy Grapes. For occupation, I put comedian. And for employer, I put Redacted Tonight. And I let that just sort of sit there and percolate.
Did you consider doing like a full fake profile? Like Because you just did the name, but you put your employer and I assume your contact information as well. Because
she had my
Carol,
number.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I don't know. It was just the name was changed.
That's the funniest part.
And honestly, the origin of Goofy Grapes was like 1,000 years ago. This comedian was doing a character that was just so weird. He was like, he kind of like spoke in a really weird voice and wore like goggles and just looked like a very mentally unbalanced person. And he called himself Goofy Grapes. And I thought it was just so funny to like, that I was like, oh, if they really find out who like Goofy Grapes is, they're like, oh, this is the guy who is like, undermining American democracy or whatever. So that
Wait,
was,
literally 1,000 years ago? You mean like early in stand-up comedy?
early in stand-up comedy.
Okay,
Like, like over like 15 years ago. But yeah, so that's what I put. I put Goofy Grapes, comedian, redacted tonight, let that sort of sit there for a while. And there's the added bonus that because I put Goofy Grapes as my name, when Tulsi's mom, Carol Gabbard, called me, she did have to say, hello, is this the Mr. or Miss Goofy Grapes? Who donated $1,000 to my daughter's presidential campaign.
She's like, this is going to be the worst call ever. And she loved it.
She loved it. And then, so like...
Did she ask about the name?
No, she didn't. She just said...
Straight to business. Right?
Straight to business. And I was like, I was like manic at the time, but it made like total sense to me that she'd be calling me because I was like, oh, I'm going to be like Roger Stone, but for Tulsi Gabbard. Like I'll be pulling the strings and aiding the campaign and consulting along the way through Carol in order to help Tulsi. Because we talked on the phone, like that first phone call was not our only phone call. We talked on the phone at least 4 more times.
Oh my
that.
God.
Yeah. And what I say in the bit, which is true, I go like, yeah, sure. I initiated all of those phone calls, but she answered every time and our rapport was undeniable. What I don't say in the bit is that I would like check in with her. I'd be like, how are you doing, Carol? It's got to be stressful for you to have your mom be running, have your daughter be running for president. And then also like we would like talk about how Tulsi did in her like Colbert appearance and how like she did in her CNN town hall and stuff like that. But anyway, cut to months and months later, I'm in and out of jail. I'm in and out of the hospital. And I get a phone call from Lee Camp, the host of Redacted Tonight. And he's like, hey man, do you want to hear how you became part of a national news story for a couple days? And I'm like, oh, fuck, what happened? And it's true. I'm going to pull this up. My manic plan worked. You guys are familiar with the Daily Beast, obviously.
Oh, sure.
This is from the Daily Beast, May 17th, 2019. Headline, Tulsi Gabbard's campaign is being boosted by Putin apologists. Second paragraph, donors to her campaign in the first quarter of the year included Stephen F. Cohen, a Russian studies professor at New York University and prominent Kremlin sympathizer, Sharon Tennyson, a vocal Putin supporter who nonetheless found herself detained by Russian authorities in 2016, and an employee of the Kremlin-backed broadcaster RT who appears to have donated under the alias Goofy Grapes.
Nice.
It fucking worked. My manic plan manifested, and then what I say in the bit is like instead of having the intended consequence of protecting Tulsi, it had the unintended consequence of getting me fired from my job.